Welcome to the Inspiration North podcast, inspiring stories from inspirational people and how they found their passion, their true north. I'm James Eves.
And I'm Michelle Minnikin, and this is the Inspiration North podcast. Today's episode, Harness the Inner Rebel, features me, Michelle Minnikin. We talk about why I had a Northern Irish accent and spoke French before I spoke English, how and why I keep bad guys out of organisations, how volunteering opens doors, creates opportunities and makes a difference, and why I would love to do Donald Trump's psychometric profiling.
Michelle is the co-founder of Inspiration North. She is a Chartered Business Psychologist, Associate Fellow of the British Psychological Society and founder of Insight's Business Psychology. She helps organisations select awesome humans and loves helping awesome humans create awesome lives and careers. Michelle is fascinated with humans and loves transforming the world of work for both employees and employers and making everyone happier and more productive. Changing people's lives is the most rewarding part of her profession. Her mission is to help humans fulfill their potential in a positive, practical, simple and fun way. For her, the Inspiration North podcast is a way of helping people realise that they have the power to change their lives and help them take action to help make the world a better place. It is a gloriously sunny day. We are in Inspiration North headquarters. The tables have turned. It is now your podcast, Michelle. We did mine yesterday, and you didn't really talk much in that. I talked for England in that one. So it's your turn now. So we always go for the first question. If we take you back to childhood, did you know what you wanted to be when you grew up?
Yes, I was desperate to be an air hostess when I was little, because we travelled quite a bit when we were little. So it just looked like the most glamorous job in the whole wide world, until somebody said, "Oh, your ambitions aren't very high." And then I was like, okay, fine, I'll be a pilot. So I grew up wanting to be a pilot, which I think only because somebody said that I needed to raise my aspirations. I can't remember who that was. It's really interesting. But I can't see properly, have no interest in physics or mechanical engineering or anything piloty. So it's just a case of, okay, fine, bollocks to you then. I'm going to do this.
So did you do that then? Or what changed?
Well, no. It wasn't never anything I really pursued. It was just something I told people because they want. I think adults wanted,
don't they?
Yeah, adults wanted an answer. So I did with my little boy. A couple of weeks ago, actually, I was in the car with him and his friend, and I said, "Boys, what problem do you want to solve when you grow up?" And so my little boy piped up. He wanted to solve world hunger. I was like, "Oh, and how are you going to do that?" He goes, "I'm going to be a fisherman." I was like, that is so random, but brilliant, excellent. And then his friend said he wants to solve the problem of people living in small spaces. So he wants to be an architect. So I was like, yes, that would have been brilliant. I'm sure I wouldn't have ever answered the question, I want to get people to places driving a aeroplane. I wasn't even interested in aeroplanes. Yeah, so it was a funny one, really.
It's a good starting point.
Yeah.
But then you've had quite a kind of a moving around type of childhood, haven't you?
Yeah, so people quite wrongly always assume that I'm not from around here. Whereas all my family are from the northeast, so Northumberland and County Durham. My dad joined the army at the age of 20, I think it was 22-ish. My parents met at college, and so they went off on this adventure together, living in Northern Ireland before I was born, and they were in Germany when I was about to make an appearance, but Mum wanted to be home to have me, so I was born in a little village just outside of Sunderland, a little thought maternity hospital, which always makes me giggle, because if anyone says, "Were you born in a field?" I was like, yes, I was. It is now a field. The maternity hospital is not there anymore. So,
but then you didn't stick around the UK for long.
Well, we got stuck because it was a big snowy winter, actually. It was 1979. I think it was the winter of discontent. So, and there was lots of snow, so we couldn't actually get back to Germany because the ports were frozen as well. So we had to wait here a while. Went back to Germany, then moved to Belgium. So we were in Antwerp in Belgium, and a very strange little girl had to go to kindergarten because it was the law, actually the age of 2, I think it was. Had to go to kindergarten, so I spoke French before I spoke English.
That's fabulous.
So Mum really didn't know what to do with me, to be fair. And then probably the age of, I don't know, 3, 4ish maybe, we moved to Northern Ireland. And we lived in the same house for seven whole years, which is unthinkable, really. So I did most of my kind of growing up, I suppose, or my primary education in Lisbon, in Northern Ireland. So I was a Protestant because it was really important what you were. It was a bit of a strange upbringing, I suppose, in Northern Ireland. Sort of being the daughter of somebody in the army, being a Protestant, living on a street with all my friends who were Catholic. So I had to go to a different school from them. It was the height of the Troubles in the 80s, so the news was full of bombings and shootings and bombs and guns. And funnily enough, I had a broad Northern Irish accent, of course, when I lived there. I can't even do it now, which is really sad because it is the best accent.
It's a great accent.
So, yeah, there was a couple of being evacuated in the middle of the night and all of that scary stuff. So it was fairly scary growing up in Northern Ireland as a child, I suppose.
It was. I always remember, because you're right, there were lots of stories of, well, there were quite a few bombings that were across the UK, weren't they? But to actually be there, I can imagine that must be even more unsettling.
Yeah, so my dad was running in the Lisbon Half Marathon when an army minibus was blown up. We could have been caught in that, but by the grace of God, we weren't. And so it was always that kind of unsettling feeling. I have actually talked to my mum recently about it, and I think she was quite affected by the whole thing as well. So that not feeling safe.
Yeah, because you never quite know what might happen, what's on the go. So is that something you were conscious of at the time, or is that more as you've got older you realise that actually, or were you more in blissful ignorance as a child? What would you sort of say?
It was kind of normal. So, reflecting on it, I did grow up in a war zone. But it was just the normal, I suppose. It wasn't anything out of the ordinary.
Yeah, just got on with it.
Yep.
So when you've been there for 7 years with
Yes.
your Northern Irish accent.
Yeah, sadly can't.
I thought you were going to say earlier, I can't do it now. That's so difficult.
It is. I can only swear really loudly in Irish, so I probably shouldn't be doing this on the podcast.
No, we'll leave that out.
So yes, I was a funny wee child. So I had a cabin bed in Northern Ireland. So basically what that was the wardrobe and the desk was underneath and the bed was on the top. And underneath it, there was like a little hidey hole. So I used to spend hours and hours reading. And I loved Enid Blyton, so I read all of her books. So Secret Seven, Famous Five, The Magic Faraway Tree.
Oh yes, I like that one.
But it was the Enid Blyton, the Mallory Towers and St. Clair's books that really sort of made me think, this boarding school lark sounds like the best fun. And clearly I couldn't get on a magic faraway, tree or go in the magic wishing chair or whatever it was. But boarding school was something that I could go for. So I think it was probably about 8. And I started asking my parents for Christmas, what do you want? Or birthdays? I want to go to boarding school. So I don't think it's like a normal thing for an 8-year-old to start.
Yeah, it's quite a request for Santa, isn't it?
I know, send me off to school, you weirdos, We moved to Germany next, a place called Bielefeld, which was about an hour south of Hanover, maybe, or Hanover, it was not Hamburg. And that, I loved it. I loved Germany. So clean, so pretty. Germans are just lovely people. So I loved living in Germany. So I did my final primary school year there. So being the big fish in the little pond, which was fine, but then the transition to high school was fairly traumatic. So going from like one of the big kids to the littlest kid. So that first year, it was a massive school as well. We had to get bussed in. It was half an hour each way on a bus. Massive class sizes. And I caught the eye of a a little vicious bully, who to me was a bloody giant, but she wasn't very fast. So so I was being taught, literally that feeling of not being particularly safe at that school. Any moment she could jump out of me. I don't know what her problem was really. So I was fairly quiet. Probably not, but so after that year, I doubled down on my efforts to persuade my parents that going to boarding school would be a good thing for me to do. Put a really rational business case. We're looking at when we'll move right in the middle of my GCSEs, and that'll destroy any thoughts of having any kind of future. So persuasive, relentless, probably. Annoying as hell, no doubt. I have one too now, so when he wants something, he really goes for it. So managed to get them to agree, went to have a look at some places, and totally fell in love with this little pink castle on top of a hill just outside of Berwick.
So was it only looking at the UK? Looking
at the northeast, yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So I looked. It was either Berwick or Barnard Castle School.
Yep.
So I ended up at Longridge Towers.
Yeah.
Absolutely loved it. When my parents drove away, I was like, oh, what have I done? So I think I was, probably, homesick for maybe, a week or so.
But what was the experience like? Is it the classic film I think of is St. Trinian's?
There was boys there, so it was fine. But no, it was lovely. So I pretty much quite quickly became the mother to all of these little children. I loved it. I got to basically live with my best friends all the time.
That's quite cool, isn't it?
It is quite cool, and there was way more of us and not enough of them, so they never knew what we were up to. So get away with all sorts of hijinks, I suppose.
Yeah.
Midnight feasts, that happened. Writing letters, because we were on the boarding part of the school was on one floor and the boys were above us. So we used to bang on the roof and send letters and notes up and down, and on dressing gown courts. Honestly, the stuff we did was
very creative.
Quite shocking. But no, it was lots of fun. And I did really well. Yes, and I met lots of cool people. And my sisters turned up at school as well, so they ended up saying, oh, look, Michelle gets to go with a box full of sweets every year. It's like, oh, boarding school means you get sweets. Those sweets have to last you a whole half of term.
It's like the chocolate frogs from Ron Weasley.
And pumpkin pasties. And so they decided they wanted to come as well, but I don't think they got on with it as much as I did. They liked being at home a bit more.
That's fair enough.
So,
because your mum and dad were still in Germany?
So they were in Germany, but then my mum had moved to Middlesbrough.
Yep.
By then, yeah. And so they saw what I was getting, like sweets-wise. I think that's the only reason that they went to boarding school as well. But they both left after their GCSEs. So me and my best friend Jenny kind of hatched a bit of a plan to move to a different school. So I think we were a little bit bored with Longridge, which is probably the stupidest thing we've ever done, to be fair, but hey-ho. We ended up in Pocklington, so we moved from being in the middle of the countryside to being in a small town.
Yep.
And, there was pubs and boys and fun and clubbing in Hull and all that sort of stuff. So we didn't do particularly well in I-levels. And of course, I didn't pick the easiest subjects, French, German and chemistry, which is really funny because they're similar to yours. So you did French, German and geography.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. They didn't let me do science.
So if I'd stayed at Longridge, I would have got much better A-levels, but, it is what it is. You can't really change past.
Yeah. So you've gone from telling people you wanted to be an air hostess, then a pilot, but from the school subjects, did you kind of know what you wanted to be doing after that?
Well, during the 90s, there was this really, 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 really cool TV program called Cracker. So a chap called Robbie Coltrane, when I say this to little children and young adults I talk to about being a psychologist. Do you know Hagrid? Before Hagrid was Hagrid, he was this very flawed police forensic psychologist catching bad guys, being incredibly clever, and and I was like, whoa, is that a thing? I want to do that. So I took myself off to university to study psychology, and I can't remember the point that I realised that wasn't actually a job, and we don't have that many serial killers in this country. And forensic psychologists in the UK generally tend to work with people in prison, so they've already been caught. I was like, ugh. I didn't love my psychology degree. I found it very theoretical, not particularly practical. So I was like, right, bugger this, for a bunch of bananas, I'm joining the army, joining the family business. So the plan was to go to Sandhurst to become an officer and work in Adjutant General's Corps, which is basically the administration function. So I would have been working in learning and development, effectively, education, for the army. But then what happened is I did my dissertation for my psychology degree, and I looked at how much control you have over your working environment and how that impacted on feelings of stress. And so basically I found out that the more control you had, the less stress you feel. So I was like, whoa, this is amazing. This is practical. This can really help loads of people. So I was thinking, oh, this business occupational psychology was the route for me. So after my degree, I took myself off on a sort of J1 exchange Camp America type program without the camp, without the children, I suppose. Got myself a little job in a restaurant in San Diego, and when I found out that I got a 2-1, I was like, aha, I can now do my master's in occupational psychology. And Northumbria University was having its first ever cohort, and I applied and I got in. And I absolutely loved every single second of it. Funnily enough, I didn't bump into James because he was there at university too at the same time.
It's a lot of people I've worked with the last few years are like, oh, you're at Northumbria. We've probably crossed paths quite a few times. It's funny. So what had changed then? If the undergraduate degree was quite theoretical, not that exciting, the dissertation changed that. What was different then about the masters? Was that more practical?
Oh, yeah. So everything we did was really practical, and it could be applied. So it was the applied psychology side of it. What does that mean then for the non-initiated? So the non-psychologists amongst us? So being able to do stuff that changes people's behaviour or lives for the better, or working environment. So it's looking at sort of the organisation as a system, teams as a whole, and humans and how they can make their work, which is where we spend most of our time anyway, better. So I was like, this is awesome. I finished that, and luck would have it again that a small occupational psychology consultancy in South Shields was looking for a trainee psychologist. So I went along for my interview in a pub in South Shields, in the Rattler, I think it was, on the seafront. And I had my first and only interview with alcohol involved. So Liam ordered a half of lager, I think, and it was. And I was like, oh, I'll have half a cider and black, which I thought was really weird, but went with it. I don't know if that was a test.
The loosener, get you to open up.
Yeah. So we had that one interview, and I was there and got a job, which I absolutely loved. So I was able to be really, really creative in that role. So I was designing assessment centre exercises, designing tools. I learned lots about coaching, and probably most importantly, I learned what running a small business looked like. These were the days where you could get funding to bring people in a business. And after a year, the funding had run out. Because it was only a year's funding. And we had a bit of a frank conversation, Liam and I, about how to keep me on, I would have to move into a more business development role. And quite frankly, at the age of 22, I was very young looking and incredibly bubbly and giggly, and very unlikely for big corporates to actually want to take me seriously. So I'm sure he did me a kindness by letting me go, but strangely enough, I had it in my head that, oh, Michelle, you can't sell things, and that's been kind of a limiting belief for the sort of next almost 20 years, I suppose. But I got over it. eventually.
What did you then decide to do after that then?
So I had to stay in the Northeast because of family. So I had to craft I had to be a bit creative with my ability, my skills, I suppose, and qualifications. So managed to craft a career, I suppose, in the Northeast. I worked with long-term unemployed people in Middlesbrough, sort of supporting them to remove the barriers to get them into long-term sustainable work, which was both massively frustrating and incredibly rewarding.
Yeah, because there were examples, weren't there, you had of families who had multiple generations that had never worked.
Yeah.
But you turned that around for some of them.
Yeah, so I remember one family who had, I think they were third generation unemployed, the kids, so they didn't know people that were working. You know, so working wasn't a part of their culture, I suppose. So, you know, working with the mum and the kids to get them all into work for the first time was absolutely amazing. But you know, there were some people that were never going to work for whatever reason. So it was really interesting. I got to work with lots of lone parents as well, so they really wanted to provide the right type of life and opportunities for their family as well. So that was brilliant. Loved it, but after 4 years, that was probably enough. So I ended up in recruitment and HR mostly after that. So I worked in, it was AMEC and then it was NTEC. No, other way around. It was NTEC and then they got bought by AMEC and now I think they're Wood. So I was there for a number of years in recruitment, and I had my little boy, and you know the maternity pay was brilliant. So that was something that all kept me there, I suppose. But I remember just being really unchallenged. This was during the sort of financial crisis, so we weren't particularly recruiting lots of people. So the job became quite dull.
Stagnant a bit. And
so I saw this opportunity at Balfour Beatty. It was for a 1-year fixed term contract because the lovely Joy Blackburn was going on maternity leave. And so I remember being really ballsy, and they wanted somebody full time because Joy was full time. So I remember being quite ballsy and saying, I currently work 3 days a week. I'd work 4 days a week for you if you'd give me the opportunity. So I went along to the interview, really liked the organisation and my boss, Nick. Or my soon-to-be boss, Nick. And I remember him having this conversation with me saying, look, Michelle, you are leaving a permanent job with all of the associated safety, company car, protections, to come here on a one-year fixed-term contract. And I was just like, yes, but look at the opportunity to grow here, and don't worry about me. We'll sort it. So at Balfour Beatty, I absolutely loved it. So basically what we were doing, we were bringing all of the corporate functions into one shared services organisation. So it was hard work, but so rewarding, speaking to so many people, helping so many people. And I was also able to both stay, because I got promoted a couple of times, and I was able to do lots of dabbling with my psychology stuff. So lots of little projects, talent management, supporting on that, career development, supporting on that, redesigning selection process, introducing psychometric testing. And probably the hardest sort of 6 months of my career was when myself and Abigail Solomon decided that we'd take on this project to bring in a global recruitment platform. And we did that. So apparently that was the first IT project in the whole of Balfour Beatty's history that went to time and budget. So mostly thanks to Abigail. She just bossed me around. It was brilliant. I loved it. Best team ever. I really, really enjoyed it. So effectively, I was a recruitment manager for a global at the time business. I was reporting to a number of people on the board, but I still had this sort of niggle. I'm a chartered psychologist. I'm not really using my psychology. And so what else is out there? So I looked and found what looked like my dream job. So I resigned at Balfour Beatty and joined this other organisation. Lasted 6 months. It didn't really work out, so we decided that I should leave. And in the car, crying my eyes out on the way back. I was like, I am not working for anyone else ever again. Because ever since working for Liam, there was always that little spark of wanting
small business, to kind of create things, put them into practice straight away.
So I was very frustrated by sort of bureaucracy in organisations, and I was always the one that even my boss's boss would come to say, Michelle, can you get this done? I know it's impossible, but I'm sure you'll be able to do it. And I had such good relationships with people in Balfour Beatty that I was able to not necessarily break the rules, but just bend them to get stuff done. That stuff that needed to be done. Done. And when I left Balfour Beatty, I left my successor with a list of 100 useful people. If you want this done, phone that one, because it's such a period of transition that the change, it was almost impossible to get anything done. So unless you knew the right people. As a compromise, I suppose, to setting up Insights Business Psychologist, that was August 2016. I thought it would be, the universe, I suppose, provided again. So there was a maternity cover part-time job at Northumbria NHS Trust, and for an occupational psychologist, organisational psychologist. There are all lots of different words that you can use. And so that was part-time and a year, and I was like, right, so we'll do this. And so I went through the process and got the job. Worked with some really awesome humans there, which I absolutely loved doing. In the meantime, setting up a business is a really lonely place, and doing everything on your own is very lonely. So I had what I thought was a really brilliant idea about going into business with all of my friends, and after a year of trying to make that work, it just wasn't working. So we decided to part ways, and
makes sense.
This is up to 2018 January. I was like, right, I need to do something. So I made Insights Business Psychology a limited company at that point. Got myself a marvelous coach. So Wendy Kendall, who runs the Psychology Practice Accelerator, and got onto a marvelous cohort with my dear friends Paula and Dominic, who I might have actually adopted as a granddad, but that's fine. He's not old enough to be my granddad, but we'll just pretend that didn't happen. And I was also accepted on the NatWest Accelerator program. So I got to work with a great coach, Laura, and made loads of new friends. So at that point in time, Insights Business Psychology was doing two main things. So helping organisations select good people and helping good humans fulfil their potential. And what Wendy helped me realise is I love helping psychologists with their careers. So I started sort of a business psychology career accelerator launch type program, which was amazing, and I absolutely loved doing it.
Because often that's the challenge, isn't it? You've got a profession, whether you're a psychologist, you could be a physiotherapist, a counsellor, whatever it might be. So you're trained in the actual skills of that job, but you're not really taught, how do I promote myself? How do I best market what I'm doing?
No.
How do I sell? How do I grow my business?
Nope.
So you need the support of someone else to, just like you've done with Wendy, how do I start to put into place the right sort of structure and processes to grow my practice effectively, isn't it?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So I made some amazing friends for life doing that, actually. It's weird when you start with clients and they become friends, and it's almost like, oh, I don't want to charge you any money.
Yes.
because I love working with you guys so much. So yes, it was a really nice thing to do. And also I realized that I really had to become more visible. So I've spent most of my life sort of trying just to fit in and not be the weird odd one out, even though I felt like the weird odd one out. So I saw this advert. Well, it's not advert. So there were this movement, I suppose, was happening on LinkedIn, and I saw that someone saying, if you want to set up LinkedIn local in your area, then get in touch. So I was like, yes, this is awesome. But I got in touch, and somebody said, oh well, Dee Coxon is the LinkedIn local person for Newcastle. So I was like, okay. So I got in touch with Dee, said, can I help you with this? And she was like, let's meet for coffee. So we went to this, and I can remember walking in and this seriously glamorous lady with this beautiful, it's not real, but fur, like floor length coat, amazingly flawless makeup and hair. And I was like, whoa, she is just impressive as a human. And she sat me down and said, I don't want to do it. You just do it. I was like, okay. So I set at LinkedIn Local in March 2018. And somebody volunteered to help me. So big shout out to my boy Chris, who helped me set that up.
Yep.
And that's where I met James.
Yes. Because I decided, well, as I've said in my podcast, I needed to leave the house from working at home and get out to meet more people. So that was something that flagged up on, it's probably Eventbrite, wasn't it?
Yeah, it will have been. Or LinkedIn. But yes, it was really interesting. It's good to sort of get myself so far out of my comfort zone. And it was all about connecting humans, which I loved. And I got to meet Alex, the founder, over the phone a lot. And sadly haven't met Anna yet, but I'm trying to wangle a trip to Australia at some point to say hi to her. And my sister, I suppose, who lives in Brisbane. But hey ho. So, we became friends with you, amongst loads of other people as well, James. And
it's a good crowd. And
he, at one point, I think I remember him we're having a coffee, and he said, you know what, I'd love to be on the radio. I'd love to start a podcast. And I was like, okay. You were off doing with work, and I went along to this event, and I met a dude that has a podcasting studio and runs podcasting training. So I properly pushed James out of his comfort zone, got that all set up, and Inspiration North, our little weekend hobby, was started. Couldn't think for the life of us what the name was, so Dee Coxon came to the rescue yet again. And I was like, we gave her loads of different words, and she's like, how about Inspiration North? And I was like, shut up, man, that'll never be available. On as a domain name or as a company name or so. But then we looked, and it was like, okay, this is how bizarre. So we this little hobby soon became a little bit more, and so the LinkedIn Local meetups became Inspiration North meetups when LinkedIn Local was sort of brought back in house to LinkedIn, and the founders all went their separate ways. And, we started getting involved with the Action for Happiness and all sorts of different bits and pieces. So is it 2020 or 2020? It's really hard. I don't know. Whatever it is, it's going to be an epic year. 2020
rolls a bit more off the tongue, doesn't it?
Yeah, 2220. No, it's going to be an epic year. So lots and lots of exciting plans.
Yeah, there are.
And almost coming back full circle, you and I went to a Reason for Being workshop run by one of the LinkedIn Local founders, Alex Galvez, and her partner, Joe Webster. So here I am, lying on the floor of a Bedouin tent inside an IRA-bombed church in London, right next to the Gherkin, and it hit me that I catch bad guys and bad humans, I suppose. And so despite not being a forensic psychologist like Cracker and, not joining the army, effectively I was reflecting that my actual job, my business, pretty much keeps bad guys out of organisations. So
powerful.
Yeah. And I was like, oh, I have to do something with that, I suppose, because, what is it that you do, Michelle? I catch bad guys. Selection processes. It's not bad guys. It's keeping the wrong type of human out of businesses, I suppose. But it was a bit of a powerful realization.
So that's a very powerful realization. Who are you actually helping, and what are you helping them with?
Insights Business Psychology, effectively we help organizations design selection processes to keep bad girls and boys out of organizations. And it's the kind of full people journey, I suppose. So get good people in and keep them performing.
Yeah.
So I work with a number of public and private sector organisations.
Mhm.
There's some really exciting projects
Yep.
in the bag for 2020.
Mhm.
And we're really looking to expand the sort of board assessment side of things. It's really interesting how people, aren't necessarily working most effectively together because
Yeah.
they don't really understand where each other's coming from.
Mhm.
So if we can have the people at the top of organisations almost behaving themselves
Mhm. Mhm.
and communicating well and getting on with each other, then
Yep.
it's just going to benefit the
Mm.
rest of organisations.
Mhm.
So I think always organisations think how we're going to fix our people and start at the bottom of an organisation, but I think that's probably the wrong way of doing it.
Yeah.
Start at the top, work your way down.
Mhm.
So yeah, it's exciting. Yeah, there's still some mentoring of business psychologists because I really love giving back to my profession.
Mhm.
So much so that I volunteered. I don't know whether I volunteered or I got volunteered to do this, but I'm a board member of the Association for
Mm.
Business Psychology.
Yes.
So I'm responsible for setting up and managing the regional managers who set up networking groups
Yep.
throughout the UK outside of London. So
Mhm.
massively challenging, and it's how to manage volunteers, which is interesting. Being a
Mm.
volunteer as well,
Yes.
and there's so many other priorities.
Mm.
But absolutely loving the role and the exposure and its challenge and learning new stuff and
Yep.
understanding how boards work. So I didn't really, looking from the outside looking in, didn't really
Yes.
see it from the inside being a part of it, I
Mhm.
suppose.
Mm-hmm. And then you've got some other roles as well. You're not busy enough.
No.
What else are you up to?
So for a couple of years now, I've been an enterprise advisor with our local LEP. So effectively, I support the careers person of a large local secondary school,
Mm-hmm.
and help them achieve their career advice. Yeah, so support the careers advisor with creating opportunities for the children to learn about different careers. So quite regularly go in to talk to them about what being a psychologist looks like, and I'm dragging you in a couple of months as
Oh,
well.
yes, that's right, yeah. Go and talk to them about what you can do with languages
Yeah.
other than the usual, be a translator or
Mhm.
go and work in telesales and customer service,
Yeah.
which is usually where people are thrown. But yeah, no, it's good to see, because otherwise kids, if you don't have examples of, I don't know, role models or seeing what other people have done, how can you actually make a decision to say, well, I want to do that,
Yeah,
and this
well-
is what I need to study to get there.
Well, I think my exposure to jobs, I suppose, when I was little was, pilot looks fun.
Mhm.
Air hostess looks fun, because you have to see them
Yes.
to understand them. So
Yes.
this is why, you have to try lots of bits and pieces out to figure out what you don't like, I suppose.
Well, that's
Like
true.
we learned in your podcast.
Very true. Yeah. And then there's another element, isn't there, with children?
Oh yes. So you and I have just recently been appointed trustees of the Pi Project charity. So effectively,
That's primary inspiration through enterprise.
yeah, you probably tell it better than I can. But essentially, we give kids £100 in a school, and they have to use it to make money, and they get to keep the profits,
Yeah.
and then they
get to-
compete. It's brilliant.
They create a product, a service, and it's tied into different lesson plans, so you can tie it to science and test materials and things like that, and
Yeah.
you learn how to market things, sell it, manage lots of different people. So it's good fun. That from the award, where was it? It was July last year, wasn't it? The award ceremony,
Yeah.
where we got to see all these fabulous entrepreneurs who were between about 7 and 10 years old,
Yeah.
most of them,
Mhm.
and what they'd done, what they'd achieved, and how they were turning profit. It's
Yeah, we've already penciled in a couple of those
a
people
couple
to
of,
come and
we've
start
got
working with us.
them lined up for
Yeah.
about 6 to 8 years time. Well, we definitely have them on board.
So yeah, my job with the Pi Project is to find, train, engage, keep motivated the volunteers that go into school. So
Yes.
you're one of them.
Yep, I do that. I go into schools. So it'll be next week, actually. We're starting or is it the week after? Yeah, it's the week after. When this is launched, it's next week. And it's stage 2, so it's actually creating the product, the service, and then bringing it to life effectively, isn't it?
Yeah.
And my role is actually school engagement. So it's increasing the number of schools that want to participate and get involved, And then the more schools that I find, the more volunteers you have to find.
So if you're a school or a volunteer, give us a shout. You want to find out more. And funnily enough, we came about that was with podcast guest number 5.
Who's this?
Chris
Sorry,
Beavers. That's how we knew about the Pi Project. He's number 4.
Yeah, who introduced us to podcast guest number 14,
Yep.
Amon Mirza, who was the founder of the Pi Project.
Yep.
So it's funny how a little weekend project can actually turn into opening doors and new opportunities.
Yeah.
So it's fascinating.
Making a difference.
Yeah. Well, that was fascinating. I don't think I've heard all of those bits before, so I've learned a lot. We're going to go to the questions now, the question section. So we asked our listeners what they'd like to know. So first one from Alan Green.
Mm-hmm.
What got you interested in business psychology? We've sort of talked around that, haven't we?
We have.
The cracker element, seeing what he was doing, catching bad guys. So that's kind of...
Yeah, so why people do the things that they do. I've always been very curious as a child and an adult, I suppose. It's like, well, why do they behave like that? So understanding the why was quite important to me, I think.
And his follow-up question is, how easy has it been to demonstrate to new clients the value in what you offer them?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, actually, because there are some people that get it immediately, and then some people that just don't know what I do still. So my job is to educate them. And, you know, the Association for Business Psychology is the home and voice of business psychology. So we do need to be better at promoting psychologists and what we do, I think, as an industry, as a profession. We just need to be better at that.
Yeah, and you've got quite an unusual background, haven't you, in that you've worked the recruitment side as well as being a chartered occupational psychologist.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I understand what being a recruitment manager and needing to find people looks like, because that was my job for quite a number of years. So yeah, it's interesting, and you know, I do love sort of the selection process and finding out more about different people and looking at their strengths and you know what we could potentially help them overcome in terms of weaknesses. So yeah, it's fascinating stuff. Humans are interesting and they never cease to amaze me still.
Definitely. So the next question from D. At an intimate dinner party, you may invite 2 guests, one dead, one living. One will teach you about life and one will teach you about business. Who do you choose and why?
So this is probably a bit of an unusual one, but I've always been fascinated by history, and Elizabeth I in particular, you know, known as the Pirate Queen, she just didn't do what was expected of her, being a woman in a man's world in a very hostile time in history, and she just smashed it, you know. Quite clearly, she killed her cousin and all sorts of really bad stuff as well. But then, you know,
she did whatever it took.
She did whatever it took. You know, absolutely ruthless.
Retain control.
Yeah. And you know, the people expected her to produce heirs. She didn't do that. She just didn't do what she was expected to do. So that, I suppose, is business, isn't it? I've always been accused of being too nice. I was given some lovely advice about, you know, Michelle, you're too nice to start a business, so why don't you get yourself a job? And I really like hearing that stuff because it gives you the rocket fuel to go, you know what, hold my beer, watch me. I don't drink beer though. Actually, I like the odd Guinness, but not general beer drinker. And the living one and that's, I suppose, about life, is Madonna. And again, it's an unusual one, but do you know anyone else who has reinvented herself so many times and is still going? And she's just a massive inspiration. And again, another strong woman who doesn't do what's expected of her. You know, at her age, she should be sitting knitting, you know, playing with the cats or whatever. But she's not. She's skimpily jumping around stages and just doing what the hell she wants. So you don't have to always do what is expected of you.
You can still be a success.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I like those. They're good. So one from Tracy. Have you ever been struck by imposter syndrome? And if you have, when did it strike and how did you manage this?
So probably not imposter syndrome. So I think similarly to yours, James, that sort of self-doubt. So Wendy's taught me recently about this thing called internal family systems, and we don't just have one voice in the head, which was almost like an aha moment. A couple of, just before last Christmas. And I kind of started listening to all the different voices in my head. I'm not crazy, promise you. And listening to the different voices. So there's not one there that's an imposter syndrome, but I have a very, very strong inner skeptic. I'll say it's not a critic, it's more of a skeptic. So, and funnily enough, it's almost characterized by Alan Rickman. Yes. You know, that sort of, that look, that sneer, that eye roll. So I get more of that inner skeptic than any kind of imposter syndrome. It's like, you know, almost it's really Michelle and his drawl. No, I love it. So it's almost, because I don't want to sort of squash any part of myself. Yes. So it's somebody to embrace, and there he is, Mr. Judgy.
But then by recognizing that voice, because I found that fascinating when you introduced that concept to me, and I suppose I think you said to me, all the voices are there to try and protect you, but that there's not just the one voice. So if you can recognize that and almost thank them for their opinion
and their protection. So you know, there's the inner badass as well, which keeps me going. And I do have a very strong inner Hermione Granger who just keeps working, and it's just the randomly organized one, because that's not necessarily one of my always strengths, but she manages to pull out of the bag when it needs to happen.
Yep, that's good.
Okay.
So from Jen Tate, this was asked to both of us as well. What do you see as my best business attribute?
So you are such a good person to have around when I'm having a crisis, I suppose. It's your ability to take emotion out of things and just be rational, logical, focused. This is the next step. I'm really grateful for that, so thank you. And it's just, you know, this is what we're going to do. And, you know, you're amazing in a crisis. And I also like the fact that you have some ideas, and I'm like, how are we going to do that? And then you sort of go away and think about it, and I've done it. Here's the idea.
Lots of time reflecting and getting feedback, and see you again, and it's like, oh, I've done this.
Sometimes it's always better to seek forgiveness than ask for permission, isn't it?
Yeah, it's fine.
You know, this thing you mentioned the other week, like, it's done, we're booked onto it. Or
I'd probably still be reflecting on if I should launch a podcast, but here we are a year later and 55 podcasts in, so it's good. I like that. Thank you for that. And from Joe Darby, what's the best piece of advice you have ever received?
Okay, so one of the times I was getting promoted, potentially getting promoted above BT, I had to go through an interview process, as you do. And the previous time I was promoted, I was given feedback that I was terrible at interviews. So I'm not very good at being on the other side of the desk, because I'm a little teeny tiny bit of a control freak. And I don't mind to admit it. I do like being in control, you know, looking at what my first dissertation was about, you know, and my second, because I kind of expanded on that from my master's, but hey-ho. So I got a coach to help me get better at interviews. So I engaged Deborah. It cost a bloody fortune, but it was needed, but it wasn't needed in the end, because there wasn't any other people applying for the job, so I got the job by default. But I learned a lot, and what I had engaged was a strengths-based coach, thanks Debbie, who made me sort of sit down and figure out what my strengths were. So we went through the Gallup Strengths Finder, Clifton Strengths Finder from Gallup, and looked at my strengths, and I was like, oh my god, look at all these strengths. And all I've ever focused on, I suppose all we ever focus on, is the weaknesses. So school teaches you to focus on the stuff you're not good at. And, you know, jobs is like, oh, Michelle, you leave everything to the last minute. I know it's all done last minute, but you just leave it, and it makes me nervous as your boss. So here's another time management course to get on. And and it made me realise you focus on your strengths and you mitigate your weaknesses, and you focus on your strengths to the point where you learn to do your strengths better. So if you're good at communicating, learn how to communicate better. If you're good at organising, learn how to organise better. And mitigate, delegate or automate the stuff that you're not good at.
Yes.
And that was just almost life-changing. And it's like, oh, I have some really good strengths, and everybody has some really good strengths. And I like that. I don't know what quote it is, but if you judge everything by ability to
Einstein.
Go on, you say it, because I've got it wrong.
Is it something like, if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, then I forget what the end of it is, but it's more or less,
Everyone's got a place.
Everyone has a place, everyone has strengths.
But they just need to be deployed in the right way.
Yes, I might not be particularly good at science or maths or whatever. However, I'm very creative. I'm good at drawing. I'm good at it's good advice.
Yep.
Yeah.
So that was almost life-changing for me.
It's good. Couple of questions, quick fire from me that you've not seen.
Okay.
I resisted the temptation to do the one that's Daddy or Chips from that fun advert, if you remember that one.
Yeah.
Whose psychometric test would you like to do with them?
Oh, Donald Trump.
Trump.
I would love it. I would love it. He wouldn't listen to me.
No, it'd be fake news.
Fake news. I'd love to take him through the Hogan stuff to find out what his light side strengths are and his dark side strengths are as well. I'd love it.
That's a good one.
So yeah,
you can always send them a letter.
Yeah. Hey Donald, I would love to do your Hogan your Hogan assessments with you, please. Yeah.
Wouldn't be released.
No.
Like his taxes. Where in the world would you love to visit?
So on my bucket list, I love history. So it's probably a bit of a weird one. I'd love to go to Vietnam and Cambodia, I suppose. Just to learn more about almost the atrocities that happened there and how people have bounced back from it. I've been to Thailand and I've never, apart from the Germans, never met some happier, friendlier people.
Yeah, they're lovely.
But yeah, want to go to Angkor Wat and visit sort of all the tunnels in Vietnam. So yes, it's just a couple of war sites randomly.
Yep. Okay. And which book should every adult read?
You know what this one's going to be. Do you want to answer this question for me?
No, I'm going to let... in case I get it wrong.
So there is a book that I read, not last summer, but the summer before. And it was delivered at the right time. And it's a book called Be More Pirate.
That's the one I was thinking, so didn't get it wrong.
High five. By a chap called Sam Conniff-Allende. And we interviewed him on the podcast. And here's podcast number... I'm testing James because I never remember.
I don't remember. It's somewhere in the teens, I think.
And so his book, his Be More Pirate movement, it really, really resonated so much that I had to track him down and drag him up to the Northeast to do a talk to me and 70 of my friends for free. Thank you, Sam.
Because you're his Northern Parrot.
I am.
Yep. Northern Parrot Queen. Because you're in the latest print edition, aren't you?
Yeah, I wrote a little bit of a thing.
It's really cool. Yeah. Just goes to show you can reach out to people and
the worst
things can happen.
The worst thing they can say is no. Go away, you weirdo. Stop stalking me.
That's really good. And I really like that one as well. It's tying in what pirates brought to modern society. Is really quite fascinating. So definitely one to check out. Yeah.
So this is the thing. There's more bad stuff happening in the world. I'm paraphrasing by people following the rules than people breaking the rules.
Yeah. Create good trouble.
Yes. My favourite is that if you hear no, we say go. There's that forgiveness permission thing again, isn't there?
Yeah, it's good. So that was a quick fire. So we always go back to the final question, which is about taking you back to your 18-year-old self.
What would I say to...
What advice would you give?
Funnily enough, I'm not sure the 18-year-old Michelle would actually listen to advice. But if I could sit her down with a cup of tea and have a chat with her, it would be along the lines of, you don't have to do things because people say you do. Harness that inner rebel a little bit more. You can change your mind. If you're on a path that you don't want to go on, you can just get off the path. Instead of just going, oh crikey, I'm going to have to follow through on this path. So just be more rebellious. You can change your mind, and don't do what people think you should do.
Yeah. Good advice.
I wouldn't listen though.
That's okay. Plant a seed.
Guaranteed.
Well, that's been lovely. I've enjoyed hearing your story a bit more. It's in its entirety. So thank you for that.
Excellent. I wonder who will win the pod off.
Yes. It'll be an interesting week to see who gets more downloads.
Yeah.
So we'll be posting that.
I'm not competitive at all.
There'll be the hashtag Team Michelle or the hashtag Team James, and we will see. Yeah, we'll see what the results are, eh?
Thanks everyone for listening. Check out all the show notes at inspirationnorth.com. Join us again for the next episode when we'll be chatting to another inspirational person. If you like this, subscribe and tell your friends. If you didn't like this, subscribe anyway.
And tell everybody.